Hey, it's Neil. It's April 18th. It's kind of early, but I wanted to talk about issue number 72. And this has to do with you when you use the fetch API in the browser to do a put on the API, and that API URL returns a redirect, and how we handle that and how that looks in three different environments. So I've kind of gone through this before, but I've got the VHTML test loaded up in Cloud Shell, localhost, and in production. And as we'll see, these all work a little differently. And so I'm going to work at production level and then backwards from there. And the more complicated is Cloud Shell, as we'll get to. Okay, so we've added a config section to VHTML where you can put in the API URL. I'm not going to use that here because we're not testing cores to the API. We're testing cores with a fetch put to the API. And this is fine if it's in the local origin, and then that creates a redirect, right? And then we can pass in a token header. So this is authorization bearer, and then this token. And then this says whether or not we do credentials include in the fetch request, which on a cores request would include the credentials. All right, and what we're going to be doing is just trying to add a file to this V object, and we'll just call it test.webm. And I'm going to do the same thing on all of these because I'm logged in as the same user, which you can see on the side. And for the test, it doesn't need to be anything big, because what we're going to do is make use of the new redirect option. I should have pasted this earlier so that it always does a redirect. Remember, we're not testing the size switch here. We're just testing put to a redirect. So let's watch the network tab and go ahead and try to put. Voila. So we did put using fetch. The API server returned a 307, which is the proper way to say I want you to preserve the method and go to this new URL. If you return a 301 or a 302, then the browser will change the method from put to get. So this worked correctly, and you can see when it did the request to Google Storage, it did not include, it shouldn't include cookie or credentials, but if we do that, I'll show you the problem that we ran into previously. See, this will not work if you do it with credentials set to include. So it does work if you include an API token, and I could use the API token here. So I can do this. We're not saying include credentials. Because this is not a cross-origin request, this is not a cores request, if you don't include the credentials, it still sends the cookie. So that's why this was working without the token. Remember, when you do a fetch, cores is not implicit. You can set the fetch type to always be cores, but without setting the fetch type, it's only cores if the origin is different. So we're going from localhost to go.surfey.me or something like that. Then we need to do that, and we'll see that in localhost. So if I don't include cookies here, and I don't set the token, and I try to put this file, and this is from my local computer, then it's going to fail. And that's because I don't have it is sending the cookie. Okay, I was wrong there. That's weird. Well, I didn't think that would actually work. Let's try it with the token. Yeah, so I don't know why it failed when it sent the cookie. It's localhost. Okay, so I have one more mystery to solve. I thought I had this all licked. Yeah, I guess this wouldn't be cross origin either because I'm going from localhost to localhost, but there's something about it being HTTP rather than HTTPS because I'm using just localhost HTTP. That again, it doesn't work if you don't have your token set. So that's another situation. This is now we're getting into development situations. Last but not least is Cloud Shell. This one is really interesting, and it took me the most time to figure this out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do a put, and I'm not going to set any of this stuff. And it's going to fail, right? If I include cookies, as we know, so if I include credentials, it's going to reset the connection because it's cutting it off, even though we're returning it. So if you look at if you're debugging and you do this, I think this is kind of interesting. I should just set the breakpoint where so we're at always so we're always doing a redirect. So it's interesting because this should be preventing that connection close error. I've been having this morning. Okay, this is what I expected. Am I crazy? So this again comes back with the CORS error because we need to we can't use cookies or credentials include, so we need to use token. Let's go ahead and try it with the token. See, it starts to get complicated very easy. This is where it started to get funny. It's doing a connection reset. That's what it's getting. However, you'll notice that I didn't ever get called into my Go server. And so it took me a while to figure this out. And I ended up enabling server debugging in Go by adding this line. And I still wasn't seeing any connection. So if we look here, this is the connection. It's 13.13.11. It's the last one. Do a put here. No. Transport read frame error. Use of a closed connection. Okay, that's old stuff. Yeah. Okay. So nothing happened. Let's clear this out so you can see it again. Last put, nothing happens. So I wasn't getting connected on the Go server. The other way that, before I found that flag, if you go into the server code for HTTP, and you can find this just by going to main and then go to one of these and say go to definition, you'll pull up the server.go file, and one of the options here is new connection. And I just set a breakpoint here, and I wasn't getting that breakpoint. So it turns out, for whatever reason, you can't, the web proxy for Cloud Shell does not support a put using fetch. There's something blocking it when I specify the authorization header. So I'm putting in the token there, right? So if I remove this, and I'm not setting credentials include, oh, and I'm going to be here. Oh no. Then that works. And I haven't tried how that would work when you're in Cloud Shell, the proxy, and you're trying to, well, actually that should work. So the next step here is doing a CORS fetch to the API, which returns a redirect. So an extra level of redirects. But just to recap, in order for the fetch put to an endpoint that returns a redirect to work successfully, you cannot do credentials include, because then that goes to Google Storage, which we do not have the control of the headers, and it doesn't have access control allow credentials set on that server. So then it causes a dreaded CORS error. And if you're on localhost, yeah, there's something funky here too, where if I didn't have this set and didn't have a token, is that what it was? No, that works. If I did have a token, no, that worked also. Nope. Yep. Okay, I'm not sure what caused that earlier thing. Anyway, you have to, when you do a fetch put to an endpoint that returns a redirect, simple rule, don't set credentials to include. It won't work. Something will mess up along the way. If it's not a cross-origin request, then the cookies can get sent and you don't need to set that header. If it is a cross-origin request, you need to specify the authorization header with the token. And that's that.